Welcome back. HPV is one of the most common sexually transmitted infections. But as Eyewitness News reporter Jeremy Baker shows us in this week's Wear the Gown, doctors say getting the vaccine could save your life.
The HPV vaccine has been around for a little over 10 years, and since doctors began administering the vaccine, they say they've seen a significant drop in certain kinds of cancer.
There's one vaccine and it's preventing 6 different cancers. So we're talking about cancer prevention not just in women, but we're talking about cancer prevention in men.
Dr. Anna Terranova, the Executive Director of Research and Information Management within the University Health System, says those cancers include cervical cancer, vaginal cancer, cancer of the vulva, cancer in the back of the throat, including the tonsils and the tongue, and cancer in the male genitalia.
We bring experts in the field to educate our providers on the importance of HPV vaccination of boys and girls age 11 and 12. But we're also trying to catch those patients that are older and did not get their vaccines on time.
When it comes to vaccinating children, Dr. Terranova says don't think of it as only preventing an STD.
Sometimes parents think that giving a child the HPV vaccine is kind of a green light ticket to sexual activity. But just like giving a tetanus shot is not the green light to go and poke your fingers on a rusted nail.
80% of people will get an HPV infection in their lifetime. Infections that cause HPV cancers have dropped by 71% among teen girls. 31,200 cases of cancer every year would be prevented with the HPV vaccine, the attendance of the average baseball game. And the HPV vaccine has proven to be safe and effective with over 100 million doses distributed in the U.S. Jeremy Baker, KENS 5 Eyewitness News.
Vaccines so important. Doctors agree. If you'd like more information about family health, call that number. Where's that number? Can we put up the number? 210-358-3045. 210-358-3045. You can also find the rest of our Wear the Gown stories at wearthegown.com.